All right, today's daf is daf Kuf Yud Dalid. This is Shabbos' daf. As we continue to talk about the Yisr Basar B'Cholov, picking it up on the first wide line of Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, Boy Minei Ravach B'doi Bar Ami Mei Rav. Although there is a shaila of the girsa here, it may not be Rav, it may be Rava or Rabba. But this is the shaila. Hamavashal B'Chalev Gedi Shalei Hinika Mahu. What's the halacha about being mavashal the basar of the Gedi in the cholav of the mother animal that never did any nursing yet? As Rashi says, it's kreva li'amele dasa, but we understand that the pasuk's dafka talking about an imoy that was already nursing. So Amarle, he says back, from the fact that Shmuel had said at the end of yesterday's daf in the drasha that dafka chalev imoy as opposed to chalev zachar, the zachar somehow developed the ability to make milk. But from the fact that he had such a drasha, we could be medayik zachar hu deloyasi lichlaleim. Only a zachar can never come into that category and be mamayit its milk. Aval hai legabe this gedi, just because it didn't yet ever do any nursing, kivan de bolichlaleim, it's going to be usher. Itmar. Vashal chalev b'cholov. If you cook chalev, the kind of usher dik of fat, together with cholov, Rabbi Ami v'Rabbi Yasi, chad omer loike v'chad omer ena loike. It's a machlekes whether you get malchus for that kind of an isser. So now Zok the Gemara, what's their machlekes? Lema b'hokem iflgi. Demand omer loike because ksaver isser chalal isser. And the fact that the chalev is already usher doesn't stop the new isser of basar b'cholov to be chal on that chalev. But umand omer ena loike, as you can imagine, ksaver ein isser chalal isser. And therefore, since it's already usher, because it's chalev, you're not going to have any isser basar b'cholov. And that's their machlekes. That's what the Gemara wants to suggest, to which the Gemara says, no, it's not true. Loi, the kuli alma ein iser chalal iser, which is, of course, what we want to say. That ein iser is chalal iser. So, ba'achila, on the eating of it, kuli alma le pligi delay lucky, everybody's masking, you're not going to get any malchus. But ki pligi, where is that machlekes between Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Yasi? That's a bishul, because manda omer leka, the one who says you're going to get malchus, lagabe that bishul's because chadisuruhu. There is only one iser of basar b'cholav. There is no pre-existing iser, because although you're not allowed to eat chalev, there's no iser to cook chalev. So when I add the milk to the chalev, you're not adding to a pre-existing isser that's chal al isser when it comes to the cooking. But umanda omerino like because lahachi afka rachmana lachila b'lashon bishul. The very fact that the Torah never said you're not allowed to eat basar b'chol, but only said it in b'lashon bishul. So that connection is there to tell us the halacha. Moving over to Tamid Aleph, that kiven da al achila loy lucky, abishul nami loy lucky. If you're eating chalev that was cooked with cholav, you're not going to get malchus for eating basar b'cholav because of the ein isser chal al isser. So therefore abishul nami loy lucky. So you're not going to get malchus even for the cooking. Taisus wants to know why we didn't switch it around, as the Gemara is actually going to do soon, and say that since you are going to get malchus for the bishul, you should also get malchus for the achila. Especially when you make a hekesh, we have a klal of lakula ulachumra makshinan, and the Ritzvah speaks that out beferish when he brings Taisus' kasha. There's actually an important Rabbi Yosef Engel in the Asvadei Raisa when he discusses the idea of lakula ulachumra makshinan. He uses this Gemara to explain the chakira of whether or not that concept of lakula ulachumra makshinan is a din safek or a din vadai. Are we only doing it because we just don't know, or because that's an actual halachic psak? And he wants to make that the central issue of this sugya. Back to the Gemara. V'ikati amri, abishul kuli amale pligi delaki. Everybody maskim, if you cook chalev with cholov, you are going to get malchus, because that isser chalev is not relevant to bishul, and therefore there's no isser chalal isser to prevent the isser chalal isser from being chal. But ki pligi achila, the mandomer eino loike deha ein isser chalal isser, umandomer loike, why would you get malchus? It's lahachi afka rachmana la'achila b'loshen bishul. It's a special gzeres hakosef. Kiven da bishul lucky achila nami lucky. Hence the kasha we just spoke of from Taisus, that you see the Gemara is comfortable going in that direction as well. Or viboy yisema mar omer chada umar omer chada v'lei pligi. In other words, both Rav Ami and Rav Asi are maskim that if you're mavashal the chalev and the cholav, you're going to get malchus. And everybody's maskim if you eat the chalev with the cholav, you don't get malchus. And really, there is no machlekes at all, because when one of them was talking about getting malchus, they were talking about the cooking, and one was talking about not getting malchus, they were talking about the eating. Now, there's a really important Rabbi Kiva Eger to know that's based on the Rambam that makes the psak on this Gemara, where the Rambam paskins that if you're mavashal chalev with your cholav, you're going to get malchus, but you don't get malchus for the achila. And the Rambam explains you're not going to get malchus on the achila of the basar b'cholav when it's with chalev, because as the Rambam says, ein isser chalal isser, and she'ein kan, I'm reading the lashon of the Rambam in Parak Tes halacha vav, she'ein kan loy isser kailel, v'loy isser meisef, v'loy isser basachas. The three exceptions to the rule of ein isser chalal isser are going to be isser kailel, when something else becomes usser, or isser meisef, when the isser becomes more chomer, or basachas if they happen at the same time. None of that happens with the isser of basar b'cholav. Frekter b'kiveger abam kasha, you're right, the chalev, which is already has a pre-existing isser, is not going to have an isser kailel, isser meisef, and it's not basachas. But frekter b'kiveger, the milk l'chayra is an isser kailel. The milk was totally mutter, and now because you've cooked this chalev together with the milk, you've now asered the milk. That should be classic isser kailel. So why isn't there going to be an isser that's chal on this isser? And for Rabbi Kiveger, because the isser basar b'cholav is unique in the sense that basar is asering the cholav, and independently, the chalav is asering the basar. It's not one matziv of isser that applies to both of these objects. And therefore, it's not negeh to isser koilel, because it's not being koilel something else. It's completely independent. So that's the Yesodis Dikar Reb Akiva Eiger to define the whole isser of basar b'chalav based out of that psak of the Rambam. Back to the Gemara. Meiseve, you want to tell me that basar b'chalav is not going to be negeh for chelev and chalav because of a isser chal isser? I got a brisa here that says hamavashal b'mei chalav is potter. Let's say you want to cook the meat together with mei chalav. Mei chalav is not milk, it's the water of the milk, which is what Miss Muffet would teach as whey. So the halach is going to be, it's potter, because even though the mei chalav is technically milchik, but it doesn't fit the description of actual chalav, and therefore not osir. Dam shebishle b'chalav, if you cooked dam, blood, with chalav, with milk, you're also going to be potter from basar b'chalav. Ho'atzamayis v'hagidim v'karnayim v'taflayim shebishlan b'chalav. Look at these other parts of the animal that you cook with milk, you're also going to be potter, because it's not called a gedi, which is a reference dafka to the meat. But here's the punchline. Ha-pigel v'hanayser v'tamay shebishlan b'chalav is going to be chayiv. You're chayiv basar b'chalav if you cook with kudshim the chalav, even though that basar was already asr, it was kudshim. So l'chayra, basar b'chalav is going to be chal on a pre-existing isser. And for the Gemara, hatana savar, isser chal isser. Don't bring me a kasha from that brisa, because that tana actually holds isser can be chal al isser. So like the Gemara, hamavashal b'mei chalav is potter. If you cook the meat in the way, you will be potter. So Messiah le l'reish lakish. Why? Ditnan, because the Mishnah in the 6th parak of Machshirin says, mei chalav harei hein kechalav. We know that milk is one of the 7 liquids, the yad shachat dam, that is machshir things l'kabel tuma, and mei chalav, the way, is like chalav in that regard. V'hameichal harehu kishemen, and the water that comes out of the olives, not quite olive oil, but that mei shemen, but that meichal is considered also like shemen to be machshir l'kabel tuma. Omar reish lakish leishanu el lahachshir zazroim. That's dafka legabe the hechsher for tuma. Aval inyan bishul basar b'chalav, as Reish Lakish says, mei chalav einan ke chalav. So you're not going to be over. Tana Rabban in the Brisa says, b'chalev imay ainli ella b'chalev imay. Dafka its mother, but b'chalev para v'rachel minayin. But b'chalev para v'rachel minayin. How do you know if it's milk, but it comes from a different animal, not a gedi? How would I also know that it's going to be Asr for Isser Basar B'chalav? So Amr Kal V'chaimer Uma Imai, meaning the Gedi. Shalei Nasra Imai B'harba. There's no Isser of Harba to mate the Gedi with another Gedi, but yet still Ne'esra Imai B'bishulai. You can't cook it with its milk. Para V'rachel She'ne'esra Imai B'harba. There's an additional Isser in a Chumrah by the Para and by this Rachel, by the sheep, which are Asr to mate with the Gedi. Ein Adin She'ne'esra Imai B'bishulai. You have a Kal V'chaimer that its milk should be Asr to cook with the Gedi. Talmud Leimer B'chalev Imai. So the Torah therefore tells us a second time chalev imai to extend the isser of basar b'chalav even to the milk of the cows and the sheep. It's actually Keneged Shmuel that said on yesterday's daf that chalev imai is coming to be mamayet the chalav of a zachar or a geshachten animal or a tamea. That those things are already nismayet because they're not imai. Frak the Gemara. V'halama likra. Why do I need a pasuk to teach me to aser the milk of the cow with the meat? L'chera ha'asyalate. The Brisa just gave me this kal v'chaimer, and the kal v'chaimer seems to be very logical. But Amar Rav Ashi, you know why we didn't want to go the kal v'chaimer mishum de'ikal l'meimer mi'ikar Dina Pircha. It's a flawed Kal V'chaimer because Mehecha Kamaisis La. What's your whole basis to say that the chalav of a para or a rachel is going to be usher to cook with the gedi? It's Me'imai, because you tell me there's a chumrah of harba with the para and the rachel that doesn't exist by the gedi. But Mala'ima Shkein Esrima B'shchita. But I'll show you another chumrah between mother and offspring, which is the Isai vs Benai that exists by all para, rachel, and gedi. Timer b'para shalei nesra ima b'shchita. That's not going to be a problem to shecht the cow and the gedi in the same day. So I have a kula now. So that which you were trying to show as a chumrah of harba, I'll show you as a kula by Isai vs Benai. Talmud Lemer b'chalev imai, a second time to be marba the iser of chalav even from a para and a rachel. Tanya idach, another brisa says b'chalev imai ainly ella b'chalev imai, but b'chalev achaisai gedayla minayin. How do you know that it's usher to cook in the milk of this goat's older sister? Such a funny havamina. Why would I think that could even be mutter? But it could be that since basar b'chalav is a chiddush, ein ba ela l'chidusha, and therefore maybe it won't apply to the milk of an older sister animal. But now the Gemara is going to go through a kal v'chaimer to show that it should be true, because Amar kal v'chaimer ma imai shenichnas imai l'dir lisaser. It's possible theoretically for a mother and offspring to be nisaser in the same year, because it all has to happen with these goats that are all born in the same year. So you have a 1-year-old goat that gave birth to another goat. So in theory, they could both be l'dir ladir lehisaser, and that's l'chayra chumra. And therefore they have essentially that kind of ability or kula to be nisaser in the same year. Achaisa shalei nichnasa ima ladir lehisaser, but lagabe its older sister, born in a prior year, which is not going to be nichnas ima ladir lehisaser, ein adin shenesra ima bebishul. That's like a chumra that it can't be nisaser. So certainly it should be usher to cook its milk together with the gedi sister. The Talmud learned the Torah told us that there is going to be the isser with the milk even with the older sister. But v'holam likra ha'asilel taka use the kal v'chaymer. So Ravashi no mishum diikal memer mikara dedina percha. There's a flaw in this kal v'chaymer because mehecha kamaisila. Where do you want to learn out the kal v'chaymer from? Meimai. You want to say that there should be a kal v'chaymer to aser the milk of the older sister together with itself. But the kal v'chaymer is gebait on meimai. But maleimai shekei nesra ima b'shchita because there's an isser of Isaibias benai tomer ba'achaysa gedayla shaloina esra ima b'shchita. There's a different kula by achaysa. So therefore Talmud lemer b'chalev ima. You can't use the kal v'chaymer, and we had to have this third time where it says chalev ima to even aser the milk of a sibling of the gedi. Okay, ashkachan achaysa gedayla, but achaysa ketana minayin. How do you know to aser even a younger sister who taka would be nichnas ledir lehis aser because they're born in the same year? And for the Gemara, asya mibenya. We'll make a tzad hashava from the other two existing isurim of basar b'chalav with the mother and basar b'chalav with the older sister. And this is how it'll work. Mehei tesi. From which of the two isurim of basar b'chalav should you learn it from? Tesi mi imai. Meaning to compare the younger sibling to the imai by saying just as like it's usher to be mavashal in the milk of the imai, it's also usher to be mavashal in the milk in the younger sister. But you would counter and say mali imai shkei nasri ma b'shchita. I'll say savias benai. But achaysa gedela teichech, where you do have the isra basar b'chalav, but there's no isra by savias benai. But mala achaysa gedela shalei nichnas imel dir le'aser, because you can't be ma'aser the older sister from a different year. So imai teichech, and therefore v'chasar adin lei roizek roizev lei roizek roizeh hatzad hashava shebehen shu basar v'asar levashal b'chalav. It's all meat because that's what's in common with these things, and you cannot cook your milk in meat. So afani avi achaysa ketana shu basar v'asar levashal b'chalav. Frak de gemara yachi. If you're telling me you don't need a pasuk for the achaysa ketana because you can already learn from this tzad hashava of the mother and the older sister, achaysa gedela nami tesi mi benya. The achaysa gedela should also have that tzad hashava from the two isurim that we already know about being vashal gedi with a chalevi mai and the milk of the rachel or the para. To which the Gemara says you're right. In a chanami, we don't need a pasuk to tell me about the chalav of the older sister. Ela b'chalevi mai lamali. Why do I need that third time? Mi boile lechidetanya b'chalevi mai ainly ela b'chalevi mai turning over to midbeis, but he atzma b'chalava minayin. How do you know it's usher to cook her in her own milk that came out of her when she was alive? Then you shecht it and you cook it together. How do you know that's going to be usher? So for that, Amar Kal V'chaymer. Uma b'makom shlei neser pri b'shchita. How do you know that when you have a pri, and here we mean the pri is like the offspring, the product, in a place where that pri is not going to be usher, together with a different pri, meaning two independent baby goats can certainly be shechted in the same day. There's no isser of Isaivias Benai. But yet still neser pri im ha'em b'shchita because of Isaivias Benai. So makom sheneser pri b'bishul, where you're going to create that isser of pri im pri. Eina din sheneser pri, because the milk of one gedi cannot be cooked together with a gedi, even though they're not mother and child. So eina din sheneser pri, meaning the offspring, and in this case the offspring is the milk, should be neser im ha'em b'bishul, should be usher with its mother, meaning the gedi herself. So in the same way that the pri, meaning the offspring, should be usher with its source mother, so too the pri, meaning the milk, should be usher al kal v'chaymer with its mother. So Talmud lemer b'chalev imai. That's why the Torah says it a third time to be marba even the isser of the gedi in her own milk. Now why do we need a pasuk? I got a kal v'chaymer. Now the Gemara is going to give us four different pirchas to what's flawed about the logic of this kal v'chaymer, and we're going to get knocked out three times before we can settle on the right one. I will show you the flaw in the kal v'chaymer from a case of a horse who's the son of a horse, who's the half brother of a pirda of a female mule. She'aser pri im pri, because in the case the horse is usher to mate with the mule. Umutter pri im ha'em, but yet still that horse is mutter with its mother, meaning that female horse. So here also, that pri im ha'em isn't always necessarily going to have more isser, and therefore you don't necessarily see that the product of it itself is going to create more isser, and maybe it won't be usser to cook it in its own milk. So we have a pircha from that case of mating horses to upshlug the kal v'chaymer, which the Gemara says it's not going to be a pircha because asam zero avhu de kogarim. The reason why it's not usser is a uniqueness over there because it's the zero ha'av that causes the isser, not the actual union of the pri and the aim. And I'll prove it to you because the haperid ben susya achi pirde yechiach, because a mule that's the son of a horse who's the brother of a mule can illustrate this. Shemoter pri im pri, the product is mutter with the product because they're both mules, but v'yoser pri im ha'aim, because those are actually different species. One's a horse, one's a mule. So let's take another run at this kal v'chaymer. Elo omer mar barei de ravina mishum de'ikel meimer eved ben shivcha achi mishachreres yechiach. I'll show you need a pasuk for pri im ha'aim, and you can't use the kal v'chaymer because you have a case of an eved Kenani who's a son of a shivcha who's the brother of a mishachreres. Because in such a case, she'aser pri im pri, pri. In that case, the Eved is usher to live with the pri, which is the Shifcha Meshachreres, but still yet, umutter pri im ha'em. The Eved can live with the Shifcha, who has the same status as this Eved's mother, because he's mutter to live with any other Shifchas. Rashi speaks out it's min ima, because we're not going to actually have him live with his own mother, but that kind of min would be mutter. So even though the Torah asers cooking the gedi with its mother's milk, maybe it won't aser cooking it with its own milk, because it's its own pri, and therefore you can't use the kal v'chomer, and we need to have the pasuk, which the Gemara says that's not going to be a pircha, because Hasam gets shechur hu dekagarim. That which causes the sister to become a shechreres is the get shechur, and it's not because of the fact that they're a product of that same mother. It's not the pre-kite. To ha'eved ben meshechreres achi shifcha yechiach. That's illustrated by the fact that an eved, the son of a meshechreres, who's the brother of a shifcha, would illustrate this shemuter pri im pri va'aser pri im ha'em. Because still, that eved is usher to live with the shifcha mother, because the son is an eved, and the mother is a full-fledged yidden at that point. Let's try again. Elo omer of Idi Baravin mishum dikil memar kilei azerim yechichu. You know why I need a pasuk to aser the gedin in its own chalav and not rely on the kal v'chomer? Because I see from kilei zeroim, the isser of planting different kinds of minim of seeds. She'aser pri and pri. You're not allowed to plant two different kinds of species of seeds, even though they're both the product of the same source, the source being the earth here, the ground. Umutter pri im ha'em, but I can still put that product, meaning one kind of seed, into its aim, meaning into its mother earth. So therefore I would also say I can cook this gedi in its own milk, had it not been for the pasuk, to which the Gemara says no, because klum neser pri im pri ela al yedei ha'em. There's only an isser of the kilayim because of the mother. There's no isser of wheat and barley and a keli together. It's only when they're put into the aim. So since the whole isser only exists when both factors are present, meaning two different minim together with the aim, you're not going to see from kilayim that there is a bigger chumrah with the pri and its aim. So the Gemara finally says, you know why the kal v'chomer is flawed? El omer of Ashi, mishum deikal amemer ma la pri im pri, shekain shnei gufim, because they're two distinct independent things, meaning the gedi and its mother's milk. Timer b'pri im ha'im, you're going to say the same with the pri and the aim of who produced it, shekain guf echad. So that's the chesarn with this kal v'chomer, and that's why mishum hachi itzchakra, and therefore, so that's why the Torah said the third time b'chol evimai, tell you that it's usher to cook the gedi in its own milk. All right, even though it's halfway through this Amud, we're going to still stop here, and we'll pick it up with Omer Rav Ashi for Sunday's Daf.